Before we begin this episode, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we record today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present and emerging. This always was and will always be Aboriginal land.
Welcome
to you.
Welcome to a no guest, except we do have the Back to the Future DeLorean, which I only just noticed. Guess what movie we exposed our kids to for the first time on
Back
Saturday?
to the Future?
Back to the Future.
First one? Second one?
First one, and it was a winner.
They loved it?
They loved it.
Really?
Yeah.
So I love this movie so much that timing is critical for me. So I don't want to go too early because if they don't like it, then I'll be heartbroken.
Right.
So we did E.T. the other night.
How was that?
Well, I fell asleep, which didn't help. But I think they liked it. So anyway, we're going to start from the start on Friday night.
Okay.
And go again. But there's certain movies, Goonies, Sandlot,
You
Back
want
to
them
the Future,
to really just...
like they have to be in it.
This is so meaningful for
Yes,
you.
100%. Gremlins.
I haven't watched hardly any of those movies.
Are you kidding?
No.
Have we had this conversation before?
Goonies, no idea. In Back to the Future, there's one song that's like an absolute banger that Damo loves, my husband. I can't remember the name of the song, but to speak to what you were saying just
Johnny
then.
Be Good? Is
Yes.
that Back to the Future one? Yeah.
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 So the next day, Damo was like, the boys actually said that song was quite good. So he was, he
He's
hit
very
that
happy.
like, yes, he
Very good.
felt satisfied. His childhood can remain intact.
So we've been seen each other for like
Ages, actually.
5 months.
So this is now season 2.
What is? You're going to
Of
forget what season it was.
Grey, the podcast, season series 2, Grey the podcast. We recorded a bunch of episodes last year. We've just kicked back off again for 2026 and we've decided for our series this year, and I really like this structure that we've landed on. We've decided on a really particular structure that we're going to take our listeners through.
We have.
I'm going to get you to give us a bit of an overview of what we're thinking for this season in a sec. Before that, our acknowledgement to country for today. I was thinking about this actually just as we were coming up into the studio, and often something has happened during the week that is so easy for me to recollect and tell. For people that are just listening to our podcast for the first time, we do a traditional acknowledgement to country, but we always like to have a bit of storytelling and make it a bit more meaningful at the start of our podcast. So for today, my brief story is really just around we're going to talk quite a lot today about kind of the art and science of organisational development and culture. And I feel like when it comes to the world of First Nations peoples, there is so much about that world that I feel is magical and mythical, and it's an art. And then there's a whole lot about it that I read and learn about that is actually really scientific but wasn't necessarily proven or whatever at the time. So been learning a little bit this week about how Indigenous folks in Tasmania used to manage the land in terms of agriculture and fire management.
Yeah.
And it is a phenomenal mixture of art and science.
A lot that we can learn.
So much. And I think this is actually a beautiful segue into what we're talking about today, because we're going to cover off a big topic throughout this season. And I think throughout it there is this common theme of use the evidence, be scientific, but we are fundamentally unpredictable, complex, mysterious beings ourselves, and then go plug us into a high-pressure environment like a workplace, let alone a startup workplace, and you just have to watch the whole thing as it unfolds and respond accordingly.
Yeah, and I think season 1 was, we wanted to do a podcast, share some stories, share what we've done, talk to some cool people.
Yeah.
We're pretty fortunate with the people we spoke to last year.
Yes.
Right? But for the most part was a big experiment.
Absolutely.
Which is probably the majority of our working relationship. Most of it is a big experiment.
Absolutely.
And we see where it goes. But I think what's happened over the course of that journey in the first kind of season is there actually is probably a little bit more structure we could bring to this that I think our audience is keen from us too.
Yep.
Which can lend itself to good kind of lessons, tidbits, things to take away, things that they can kind of put into practice in their own organization.
Yeah.
And so I guess where we've landed is the theme in which we operate and have operated together is organizational development. And that topic in itself, I think, is fairly misunderstood.
Yes.
And we're going to have a conversation about that today. But systematically going about building an organization or changing or evolving in an organization is kind of where org dev sits.
Yep.
But often people kind of fly towards kind of the outcome, a better culture or a high-performing team. But that's not how you do this.
Yes.
And so what we've been doing for many years is the how.
Yep.
And so what we decided to do for this season is actually walk through all the key initiatives and things that we did underneath that org dev umbrella.
Yes.
Through the journey that we had at the Lumery.
Yeah.
Right. And so take the listeners on a bit of a structured journey of what we built.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think I'm excited for this season because I think we can get a really nice mixture of some good anecdotes and stories. But actually, if our listeners follow along with us this season, they should, by the end of it, have a really good understanding of what the heck is OD actually. What is organisational development? How is it different to learning and development, HR? Where does it fit in with strategy? So by the end of this series, our listeners should have a really good understanding of OD, but also should have some really fantastic ideas of a bunch of the different tactics that we put into the Lumery, the startup that you started, along with a couple of other co-founders. Business ran for 7 years, sold just over a year ago.
2 years now.
2 years?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, 2 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do I have December 2024
That was
in
go
my
live.
mind? That was go
that was
live.
integration. But yeah, March is when we sold. So we just actually clocked over 2 years.
2 years. So 2 years signed the pieces of paper and then a year and a half ago.
Since we've kind of been
into the business. So there's 7 years of really rich insights, and I think this is a really good time to talk about it because it's still really fresh in our minds. And also a lot of what we did back then is hyper relevant today, even more relevant with the changing world of work, with AI and how we're interacting with non-humans in our workplaces. I think what we did back then, it's not let's reminisce about high school, those were the glory days. It's actually really good stuff that I think people can use now.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect of this is it wasn't as if on day one there was this org dev playbook. I didn't even know what org dev was.
Yep.
We hadn't met. You came into the journey a couple of years into the business. We had worked with other consultants, etc. But there is no perfect framework to follow.
Yep.
And I know we're going to talk about this in a second. But that this is a big journey of kind of testing, trialing, experimenting, doing things, but with a very clear strategy and outcome in mind. I think that's a big difference. So I think today's episode, we're going to focus a lot on the essentials of starting this journey. You're going to do this every time I say essentials. For those who are listening, what would you call this action?
It's rubbing of the thumb on the fingers to conceptualize. I don't actually know why this is synonymous with essentials.
Anyway, not important to discussion at all.
It's a thing now.
So what are the essentials from a leadership perspective, vision, strategy that you need to think about and consider?
Yep.
But before we kind of get into that, let's go back to org dev.
Yep.
Give us a definition. What is organizational development?
What is organizational development? So I'm going to throw the question back at you. What did you think it was, or what were your ideas around it? Had you heard about it before?
No.
Tell me your little journey with OD, because I find, before you do that, I'll just quickly say most people don't really know what it is, misunderstand it. Even, I would say, even for me as someone working in OD, it's making more sense to me every single year that I'm in the space. So even my own understanding of it, as someone who says my main craft is organisational development, even it is, for me, it is making more sense. So I think it is horribly misunderstood, poorly executed. So tell me your understanding of OD.
So when we embarked on the journey or started on our org dev journey, org dev was not a phrase. It was not a word that we used. It wasn't something that I looked out for or went in search of. Our journey really started with, we're building and growing something pretty special within the business. And that involves us bringing lots of people and new people into the fold. And as we bring those new people, there are systems, there are processes, there is like hierarchy, there is management structures that we need to now build that we never had before. These new people now need to get along, right, fairly quickly because they're going to show up and rock up to clients and deliver
really good work
for them. And, you know, we knew that we wanted to build this really diverse business, which means people from different backgrounds, different organizations, different understanding of how to solve these problems because, you know, ideally you pull all those people together, you'll get, you know, lots of great magic. But what became apparent pretty quickly was you can't just like bring a bunch of people in a room and go, okay, off you go.
Go forth.
Great magic.
Yeah.
We as the business have to put things in place to help that come to life. And that started with some really easy things like a vision and a strategy and values and bits and pieces. But then as we went through our journey over the years, it became very clear that every single part of the business is what we needed to make sure that we were able to pull a lever or tweak. And so actually I only describe it as org dev like after the fact, like really late in the journey.
Yeah.
Early on, it wasn't something that wasn't a phrase that we used. So we had an outcome, we had a strategy, we knew what it was going to feel like, what we wanted to feel like, and then we did some work. And then at some point we coined it as org dev.
Yeah.
Or we realized, that is org dev.
This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Have a crack at defining it, OD.
Well, I mean, this is like I could cheat because we've had this conversation, but
I think you know it.
So
like
I
I've given you some textbook definitions, but when you replay it back to me, even without my help,
you
get it.
I think it's systematically designing every single part of the organization that ultimately leads to you being able to deliver your strategy. And that strategy is commercial, it's profitability, it's the people outcomes you're looking for, high-performing teams, great culture, all the rest of it. But there are all these things that happen in the business that have some role to play in delivering that outcome. And so org dev is the very systematic approach to figuring out which of those levers you're going to pull and what benefit it's going to create. And some of them are really, really, really small. Like, and we'd argue about these things, right? Like, should we really change, I don't know, the Confluence page about job descriptions? Like, is that really going to have an impact? And then some of them are really big. You know, how do we change our talent onboarding, talent attraction process? Because, you know, that's a big aspect of the business. So that's how I'd kind of define it.
Yeah.
How's that fit? How's that suit?
So how do you differentiate that from someone who might come in cold and say, oh, it just sounds like you're trying to be as productive as possible, get as much out of your people as possible? How is OD not that very output, commercial, profit lens?
So I'm going to talk about it from my perspective. Our scorecards from the get-go were balanced in that we had very clear innovation outcomes. We had let's call them people-based outcomes, but engagement, psych safety, those types of measures.
Yeah.
And then we had commercial outcomes.
Yeah.
And so like you can't do one without the other.
Yep.
So if all of our engagement, our psych safety scores are really low, I can probably bet that our productivity, efficiency, and commercial scores are also going to be pretty low.
For sure.
So the way that we approached it was, well, we have to be able to hit all these types of metrics. Now, granted, there's trade-offs with certain initiatives, and that's okay.
Yep.
But, you know, the net sum of everything we're doing is ultimately delivering those sets of outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's right. You can push and push and push and not have a balanced scorecard, not focus on the people side. That can work for a while. If the market is in your favor and everyone's looking for jobs and they're willing to work in a, suboptimal environment, you might get lucky and people will work their fingers to the bone.
Yeah.
Or you have got such a good brand or name or whatever that people will come kind of no matter what, and they will deal with all the shit. Or you get these, on paper great results, but turnover is high and absenteeism is high, etc. So to get a truly sustainable, like a sustainably successful business, yes, all of those things have to be part of it. I often phrase it as, OD is going to help your business succeed, because of and due to your people, not just in spite of them or at the cost of them. So if we look at a really textbook definition of organisational development, because it gets regularly confused with learning and development, this idea of OD is just the grand sum of everyone's learning and development kind of spiralling upwards. It's not learning and development at scale. Also gets absolutely confused with HR and kind of very pure people culture kind of initiatives. So I always look at organisational development as two aspects. There's two parts of it. One phrase I use is that it's systems thinking in action, which let's dissect in a sec, because systems thinking can be a bit buzzwordy, like human-centered design, design thinking. It's
Everyone's
kind of in that realm. Everyone's a system thinker, so it can get pretty convoluted. And I know that we keep, we rehash old things and rebrand them, and some of the fundamentals are the same, some are different. So we can talk a bit about what do we even mean by systems thinking. But essentially, organisational development is treating the whole of the business like this beautiful garden or an ecosystem or a vehicle where all of the parts are interrelated, and if you do one thing over here, it's going to have a flow-on impact over on this side. You pull this thread of a woolen jumper, something will move on the other side. So organisational development starts from this viewpoint of everything is connected. So the 1%ers do make a difference.
Do matter.
Yeah, those 1%ers do matter, because they might just move one little cog a little bit further, which then moves a few more cogs, which then changes people's attitude towards something, and then someone else's level of influence goes down. So everything is connected.
Yeah.
So organisational development concerns itself with looking at the entire system of the organisation, and we'll talk in a sec about one way we can look at that is in terms of the 4 organisational assets that we'll talk about in a sec. But the other thing that I think is so critically important, and people in companies, I know they misunderstand OD by where they stick it in their business.
So I was just going to ask you, where does it live? So structurally in the organisation, where does it live? So eventually, so for those that are listening to this for the first time, you worked at a org dev consultancy.
Organisational psychology.
Yeah.
Org dev. Yep.
And had consulted into our business for a couple of years, and then eventually came over and was part of my executive team.
Yep.
So you had a seat at the table of the business.
Yep.
I'm not sure I see that very often. So where should it sit?
Yep.
But where do you often see it sitting?
So organisational development, in addition to being systems thinking and action, looking at the whole ecosystem, OD is also another way you can look at it. It's strategy execution. Go and build your beautiful strategy, use a fantastic framework. You have to have a strategy. That has to be your starting point, obviously, in any business. You have to have a strategy. Your work that you do in that OD space is about then going, great, here's our strategy. This is our end point. This is where we want to get to. How are we going to create all of the conditions in our system to be able to make that actually happen? So often I see, we don't have a really good strategy, or it's not actually a strategy. It's like a very inflexible set of rigid decisions, as opposed to like a set of ongoing choices that you're, continually testing. So either organisations don't have a strategy, or they have a shit one, or they're just not thinking like in a properly strategic way, or they've got this fantastic strategy and they've gone through a great process to create it. And then there is this just dead zone, this grey middle area of static, like on an old TV, where it's like, well, yeah, we've got this strategy and then we're just expecting it to just get delivered. So then all of these teams kind of at the coalface are given KPIs and targets and blah, blah, blah. But the system has not been set up. The conditions are not there across people, systems, processes, relationships. The conditions are not there for that strategy to actually happen. So as an example, let's say an organisation's strategy is that they want to become far more innovative. They feel like they're getting left behind, so they need to get better at testing products and getting them to market quickly. And it's a whole mindset change. It is a third order change in that business. If you then go and say, well, great, that's our strategy. Oh, we're going to need some good leaders to do that. And then you just bring in some random leadership program. Great, you might be coaching your people to get some foundational leadership skills.
But the system is broken.
Well, the type of leadership you need is very particular for that strategy. You need leaders who build phenomenal psychological safety, who can handle failure, who've got a track record of failing and dusting themselves off and coming back up again. So unless you know your kind of clear strategy, that's the first kind of failure point. But once you've got it, then you have to reverse engineer everything in your whole system, or you're going to be trying to bake a cake with the ingredients for a lasagna.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to come back to your question, where should OD sit? I would have really struggled to come into your business from an ethical perspective if I hadn't been on the executive, not for status, not for the magic of all of that kind of stuff that comes with those senior roles, but purely because that's where I can have influence and make decisions and help you make decisions on all the conditions across the system. So regularly we see OD because it's not well understood, not well resourced. Typically it is hidden underneath a people and culture HR function. Often it's 2 or 3 layers down. If we can,
So it's people versus a function. Like the function is not org dev. There's some org dev people
There's
in the
a
function.
few org dev people if you're really lucky, but they're shoved into people and culture. So you can see why that fundamentally is not going to work. If the OD person is meant to be looking at the whole of the system and influencing the whole system, and they're meant to be helping you create the conditions to actually deliver your strategy, but they're 3 levels down under an HR person, it doesn't work. It's pointless. So they have to come in at that ability. Either I would stick OD with like absolutely hand in hand with the strategy team. So you've got strategy, strategic thinking and planning and delivery all kind of together. But if you're being really serious about actually creating an organisation that can help you deliver your strategy, it has to be right next to the CEO.
So I recall times when we had friction in the business where the question would be asked of me, hey, why is Mel looking at this thing? Why is Mel looking at this part of the business, this fairly standard operational process that any other kind of consulting / agency style business would have?
Yeah.
And
what's she doing in my business?
Yeah, what's she doing here? What's she doing? And maybe it's a little benefit of hindsight, but there was this inherent belief that every single component of the business is relatively up for grabs.
Yep.
Right? Not to break it for the sake of breaking it or change it for the sake of changing it. But if you are going to design the whole system, you can't go, well, actually, but this stuff here is out of scope. This stuff over here, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But probably most people are frustrated with this particular part that's out of scope.
Yep.
And that has the biggest, kind of detrimental impact to the performance of the people.
Yeah.
And so, it was just as you were kind of talking about where it sits, and these are some of the issues it can or challenges you can expect to face if this is a journey that you're about to.
And if you are a good OD practitioner and you've been brought in at a level of the business that you don't have the mandate and the understanding and the authority to go and poke around and say, actually, I think this area is, we probably need to pay a bit of attention to that, then you're just not able to do OD. You're just not doing OD work. The challenge, though, is that it can be seen, and I just so wholeheartedly disagree with this, but it can be seen as it's a bit of a luxury. In my mind, it is a massive investment in reducing a whole lot of other friction downstream.
Yeah.
And so often strategies are just not enabled. They're not enacted, and we keep throwing, slightly different things at the same problem. Whereas I'm like, come back to the foundations, come back to the system, look at the strategy and let's work backwards. So for me, it feels like there's just no other way to actually execute your strategy in the fastest, smoothest, least amount of friction. I think that's why I'm often brought into companies as well, though, at the moment, is I'm an extra pair of hands. Like, not only have I got that OD capability that the business is lacking, but they often just don't have it in-house. So they're just outsourcing kind of that kind of a role. But I just can't wait to see more businesses really understanding what OD is and bringing it in, because my work would wholeheartedly change a lot, because there's a lot of stuff I do that's quite downstream, just mopping up shit that we tried to solve before it even happened. So a lot of the work I do around culture and capabilities frameworks and leadership and performance management, all of that kind of stuff, if we solved it a bit further upstream, those problems just stop existing.
So there are some like categories as to how org dev flows through the business, right?
Yeah.
So you've got a bit of a structure or a framework to share.
Yeah. So the way I've always looked at it, and it's interesting how often you and I have worked together where we do things and you've got an intuition and I follow it and we test it and we experiment with it, and then we see that it absolutely maps to a framework or an idea, or you read something and you're like, that's the thing that we've been doing. So this is something that I've put a language around only in the last year or two, but would have absolutely makes sense in our context back in the business when we were working together. So OD, you can look at 4 key organisational assets. So in no particular order, the structure. How is your business actually designed?
Like the org chart.
The org chart, the actual organisational design. Are you a cross-functional, really collaborative teams kind of a vibe, or are they silos? Just structurally, how is the business set up?
Matrix, agile, all that sort of stuff.
All of those things. And even fundamentally, what we were talking about just then, where does OD sit in your business? If you've got OD sitting in the wrong spot, you're already hamstrung. So structure, you look at the structure, first of all, to kind of set yourself up. Also with the structure, coming back to what structure do we need for our strategy? If, for that example we used before, we want to become a more innovative, agile, test, iterate, fail, blah, blah, blah business, what kind of structure do we actually need? Because again, that's an example where we've got a business can have a beautiful strategy, but there's no way their structure can deliver it because it's just not matched.
Totally.
So structure is the first organisational asset. And a second one is systems and processes, speaks for itself. So this is less about the system. It's more about the individual components of different systems.
So explain that when you say the system.
So I look at the whole of the business is a system. And it might be most businesses are open loop systems like farming, the weather is part of their system.
Sure.
It is an open loop. Or, what's happening over in the other parts of the world, the macro influences. It's a fully open system. Very few businesses are a closed loop system like a fishbowl. Very few businesses are not, or almost none really. Some are more open than others.
Yeah.
Is the message.
Yep.
So some, like farming, massively open system just because of the weather.
Yeah.
Whereas a 3-person graphic design outfit is a more closed system, as an example. So systems is more – so I think about the system as the whole, like a garden. A business is like a garden, and the whole ecosystem, the plants, the weather, where you put everything, like that's a system. When we talk about the organisational asset systems and processes, it's just how – like what's your operating model like? How does value move through the business?
How do we get shit done?
What's the machine like inside, all of the different. So there might be a system around how we onboard people, and that comes with a bunch of procedures.
Yep.
So all of the like nitty-gritty systems and processes that happen within the big broad system. The third one is capabilities. So that's not just this person is excellent on these technical things. It is leadership capabilities. It is the capabilities of your tech stack is able to actually do the shit that it's meant to do.
Tools and people.
Tools, people. It's all of the things that you need to be able to get shit done sits under that bucket of capabilities. So again, if we've got this strategy that requires innovation, there's going to be a set of capabilities required for that compared to some other kind of a business with a different strategy. And the fourth one is networks and relationships. So that is everything within the business, how people work together, communicate, interact, connection, belonging. But it's also how you deal with your stakeholders and your vendors and your suppliers and all of the relationships outside as well.
This is where I think a lot of folks when they think about high-performing teams and what it takes to build this sort of environment, they will move very quickly to, I guess, what lives under the network and relationships bucket.
Yep.
Behavior, leadership qualities, feedback.
Yes.
How to do all those types of things.
Yep.
But we'll give very little focus to the capability.
Yep.
And then the system.
Yep.
The processes and the structure.
Yep.
And to what you were saying earlier, if you're going to put a whole bunch of barriers in front of people and then say, but here's all the tools you need to behave differently and work with each other better, but we're not even going to think about anything else that the organization has. I mean, there's only so far you're going to get.
Yep.
Right?
And if we boil this down, what it fundamentally comes back to is I am lazy. You agreed with me very quickly. Just then.
I thought you were telling me about your
I am lazy.
Glad
there is
she
this
said
there's a really cool approach to management that's like just invert everything, make everything as easy as possible. Like ask yourself questions like, what would make this problem go away entirely?
Sure.
Do the easiest, laziest thing. So if I think about a bunch of stuff that we did in the business and what I recommend to my clients now, so often it comes back to what's going to be the easiest? What is going to produce the less friction, the least amount of friction?
Lowest hanging fruit.
What's that?
The lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah, but not in just the quick wins, more in what is going to take a fair bit of effort to change and put in place, etc. But then it's done.
Yeah.
And it continues and it sustains without me having to use all this energy bringing people together or whatever. So this idea of find a rich solution to your problem that might take a bit of effort to get it right, but then it makes your life easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think so we are going to spend this season on walking through all the different things across these 4 areas, right?
Yep.
So structure, systems and processes, capabilities, so tools, people, the rest of it, and then network and relationships.
Yep.
And we're going to use the kind of luminary journey that we went on to highlight the things that we did across those 4. But for the rest of this episode, we're going to start with where it all begins.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the essentials for leadership. I did it again. See? Essentials.
I'm going to
as you start this journey. Because I guess we're making an assumption for people that listen to this, right? They're either in positions of influence, so they're running teams or running parts of a function or organization.
Yep.
And they have some interest in doing things differently.
Yeah.
Or at least evolving what they're doing.
Yeah.
We assume that's why they're listening to this.
Yeah.
There might be people that aren't in those positions, but do want to put this sort of stuff in front of their leaders.
Yeah.
Who do have the influence.
And this might normalise why they're tearing their hair out a bit.
Yeah.
If they're feeling powerless or not able to get stuff moving or it's not quite clicking, this might help make some of those things make more sense.
And we have full recognition that not everyone has the opportunity to start a business from scratch and evolve it in its early stages in infancy.
Yeah.
And so there'll be businesses on all ends of the spectrum here that we're talking to. So we're going to try and make sure that we're kind of providing, input, guidance, tidbits that is applicable to all to businesses, all shapes and sizes.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. We're really lucky that we were, you guys were building it from scratch and we could, control things, had full say over the strategy, all of those things. We're going to provide kind of a playbook across the employee life cycle of how we did all these various things. And I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed or think, well, shit, we can't even do half of that. Because so often you look at amazing businesses and what they've done and what they've achieved and it can just seem so far out of reach. So much of what we did, a lot of it didn't work and a lot of it failed and a lot of it was trial and error. There will still be things now, I'm sure, staff members, team members of ours will listen back and they had a bit of a different experience. So none of it's perfect. So I think we also want to have this message of, just like in systems thinking, like the cogs of a machine, don't underestimate what you can achieve if you do just start to turn one cog a little bit differently and, that we can all have quite a lot of influence in various parts of a business. The people in those really senior roles obviously have a huge amount of influence, but everyone can make little changes that do, add up over time as well.
So you get lots of calls from lots of people, lots of businesses, lots of leaders to say, hey, come and help us. We are trying to do something different.
No one has said come to Barbados or the Bahamas.
List it out.
Or the Maldives.
Yeah. What's the ideal phone call that you would have said?
Oh, location. I'll think about it. But no one's taken me anywhere tropical for a while.
Okay.
So let's
So if you want to hire Mel, that's the way to go.
Yep.
And so you go and meet, these people and these leaders, but you probably have found that there's some sort of consistency in the leaders that are ready to drive a change in this area. Perhaps know about org dev, don't know about org dev, don't know. But like there's the
essentials.
The essentials, the things that they are clued in on that probably that you can kind of see and go, okay, that's someone that is on the right path of thinking about this the right way. So what does it look like? What do leaders need to be mindful of?
That is a fantastic question and very topical for me where I'm at in my business, because in 2025 I took on some pieces of work and learnt a lot of lessons in them, in that for 2026 I've doubled down more than ever on not taking on any work unless I feel really confident that I'm going to be impacting and able to support them impact the system.
And you're in Barbados.
And I'm in Barbados
Yes, gotcha.
or the Maldives.
Yeah.
So you can come in, and I don't want to be too, hard on myself, and so many things emerge afterwards, but you can come into an organisation, do an evaluation, do an assessment. What do you need? Where are you at? What's happening with culture, leadership, blah, blah, blah. That's the easy bit. The diagnostic part is easy, especially if you are genuinely interested in the business, can build rapport, people are willing to, open up, etc. I find that bit is very easy to build that trust and get the answers. It is what happens next. And I think sometimes we come in and we see these problems, but if the business is not ready, then you've opened a massive can of worms and then the business flounders and doesn't really know what to do with them. So you ask a really important question, and for me in my work, I'm becoming stricter on that, in that I can see roughly on some kind of a maturity curve where they might be, but if they don't tick a couple of boxes, I just can't do work because it's not OD work. It's just a bit of ticking boxes and fix it work. So what a leader needs for like really effective OD work to work in their business, they need to first of all have a strategy and know the value of it and be really good strategic thinkers and understand all of the nuance of what, thinking strategically really means. They need to be willing to go to every single corner of the business and poke into everything. No sacred cows. Everything is kind of up for grabs. They need to really deeply understand that it's not going to be like if a consultant who says they're in OD comes in and then produces a perfect roadmap, that's bullshit. Because we can have a bit of a sense, like you said before, of kind of the outcome and where we want to get to, but you have no idea what the twists and turns are going to be along the way. So the ideal leader for really taking this kind of approach, they need to be really willing to roll with the stuff that emerges. Yes.
Yeah.
Those are some of my thoughts. What do you think? What does a leader need for this kind of thing to have a chance of working?
So I think starting with this outcome in mind is really interesting. Again, I look back at our journey, and we didn't start with, we want to embark on this organizational development journey.
Yeah.
It was based on what we want this business to feel like, look like, sound like. Where do we think things are getting in the way of that occurring? But then ultimately, like, what does it look like in a couple of years' time, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time? What are people going to say about this business when we're not in the room? What's the industry going to say when they talk about this business? And so those things are just like, I think strategy, and I think what is that long-term vision and place that you want to be.
Yep.
And then there's a plan.
Yeah.
And then to your point, especially in today's environment,
Yep.
if you're planning 5 years out, fine, but I think you have to know that that's going to evolve.
Yeah.
And so how much control do you really have? Is it the next quarter, the next 6 months, the next 12? It's somewhere in there probably, right? But then the acceptance that you're going to learn as you go.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we did.
Yeah.
And I think those are some of the essentials.
Yeah.
That if you are on the journey, embarking on the journey, if you're the person driving this, that you've got to really adopt.
Yeah.
And if that seems difficult, then like don't do anything. Start there first, right?
Yeah,
Like kind of
absolutely.
Talk to people,
Yeah.
get some guidance, coaching,
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. I think we were quite fortunate because you were kind of org dev, coach, psych, like a bit of a unicorn for us in the part of the journey that we were in all the way through to selling the business.
Yeah.
Because we were evolving as we went. We
Yeah.
didn't have all the answers,
Yeah.
but we kind of knew where it needed to go.
Yeah. And I think that's right. You don't have to have a rock solid vision. I don't think that's a bit of an oxymoron anyway, but you need to have this loose, fuzzy sense of, this is what we're trying to create. This is where we're trying to get to. And then your executive team needs to be fully on board that as well.
Yeah.
So I do think we often get tangled up downstream simply because that early alignment is not there. So when you've got that really good vision, clear enough, everyone's aligned, it becomes your decision-making tool. It's like, well, does this fit with who we think we want to be? And and that's where your values come in and purpose, all of those things kind of fit in there. But this was, and I've said this on the podcast before, the things that really attracted me to working with you at the Loomery was this attention to detail, that small things really matter, and this focus on excellence. And I've always described you as really progressive and a really forward thinker. And if you hadn't been willing to kind of take a bit of a risk with this, trust me, but also challenge me on certain things, I just wouldn't have come for the ride.
Yeah.
So I think I read a post on LinkedIn the other day where someone had said something like, you can, if there's any great organisation, most of the time you can bet that it's got great leadership. And I'm like, there's no most of the time about it.
Yeah.
It is 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And so often in my work, I'm coming back to what the heck is going on at that leadership level, that most senior leader level. Because that is where it all begins and where it all ends. So I don't really follow particular projects or types of work so much at the moment as I follow leaders.
Yeah, people.
Yes, I follow particular leaders who I can tell they've got this like vision, this willing to be open about things, this willing to be challenged and in the light of new information change their minds. So I'm following those kind of people because they will create all of these things in that organisational structure, all of the assets around them. So if you get that bit kind of humming, again, I can be lazy. So much is easier downstream.
It's an interesting insight for boards, who are overseeing an organisation going through change or evolving or needs to pivot because of innovation or AI, whatever else it might be.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about the leader that you're bringing in, and do they have some of these qualities that's required for change?
I'm doing so much more CEO succession planning work than I ever used to because there is this recognition that there's these core leadership attributes that are really important across the C-suite.
Yeah.
But depending on the business's strategy and what the next few years involves, they're going to need a particular type of CEO, and some other business might need the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So more and more I'm doing as there is this deeper understanding of matching everything in your system, including the CEO, to your strategy, there is this more of a recognition of we need to get the right person in, not just to find the best leader, because there's no such thing.
Totally.
It's what is the best leader for the strategy we are trying
Absolutely.
to produce.
Okay, so Ep 1, bit of an overview
Yeah.
as to what we're going to be doing for the rest of the season.
Yep.
I think we're going to continue this discussion in the next episode around the essentials of leadership and the essentials of what starts the journey.
Yep.
And what are some things that we know to be true.
Yep.
And perhaps some things that don't work.
Yep.
We're going to follow the rest of the season coming back to these 4 things, right? So structure, systems and processes, capability, network and relationships.
Yep.
And so as we kind of go through this, hopefully everyone's hearing some good tidbits in those
and
buckets.
I just want to reiterate it again 1,000%. I listen to myself and I'm like, wow, I know so much interesting shit. And you know so much interesting shit. We are only in this position because of so much trial and error and stuff that didn't work, and you and I are still learning and growing. I said to a client last week, I look at work I did last year and I think, what the hell is that shit? Like, we're always growing and developing.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I really want to remind people not to get overwhelmed by any of this, because it's all manageable and doable and interesting stuff, and none of it needs to be seen as this like on a pedestal fancy crap, because it's not.
No, and speaking from experience, not all of it worked. We got a lot of shit wrong.
Yep.
So we should talk about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
All right.
invite, people on to tell us what were the worst things
We should do that.
we did.
We should do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. See you in the next episode.
See you then.
Bye.